Welcome to Cassandra Revenge Stories, where quiet women turn betrayal into reckoning.
My name is Marilyn Mathis. I am 37 years old. And on a Tuesday afternoon in March, my brother Derek walked into the office while my phone was pointed directly at the shared computer screen. I had 6 loan documents open in separate tabs. My social security number was highlighted in yellow on every single one. My thumb was on the shutter button. He was 3 feet from the monitor when I turned my body, smiled, and said, "Hey, do you know if Mom wants Chipotle or Panera? I'm doing a lunch run." He looked at me. He looked at the screen. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. He said Chipotle, grabbed his keys, and walked out. I did not exhale for 11 seconds. I know because I counted. What I found on that shared computer changed everything I thought I knew about my parents, and what I did about it over the next 6 months dismantled the company they spent 22 years building. Let me tell you how I got there. Before I go any further, if you have ever been the person in your family who holds everything together while someone else gets the credit, the investment, and the applause, then this story is going to sit different for you. Welcome back to our channel. We tell the stories of people who were underestimated until they stopped being convenient. If this one hits close to home, drop a comment and consider subscribing, because what happened next is the kind of thing you plan in silence and execute in daylight. To understand how I got to that Friday at 5 o'clock, you have to go back to a desk in Columbus, Ohio, where a 25-year-old woman sat down to do the books for her parents' company and didn't stand up for 12 years. I became a CPA at 24, passed all 4 sections of the exam on the first try, which if you know anything about the CPA exam, you know that doesn't happen often. I had offers. A mid-size firm in downtown Columbus wanted me. A corporate controller position in Cincinnati was on the table. But my father, Glenn Mathis, sat me down at the kitchen table the week I got licensed and said the words that would define the next decade of my life. He said the family needed me. He said the property management company, Mathis Property Group, was growing. 22 rental units across the east side of Columbus. He said they needed a real CPA to handle compliance, bank reconciliations, vendor payments, tax filings, tenant ledgers, everything. He said it was temporary. He said when the company was stable, they would formalize my role, give me a 30% ownership stake in the LLC, and I would have built something real, something that was mine. I believed him. I was 25. I believed my father. So I sat down at a metal desk in the back office of a converted storefront on East Main Street and I started working. 55 hours a week. No salary, no hourly wage, no contractor agreement, no equity documentation, nothing. My mother, Patrice, said it was family duty. She said that was what family does. You show up, you contribute, and you trust that it will be recognized. I filed the company's taxes. I reconciled 11 bank accounts. I managed vendor payments for plumbers, electricians, landscapers, and a pest control company that sent invoices with handwritten math I had to correct every single month. I processed rent from 22 units. I handled the lender correspondence for every commercial loan on the books. I was the compliance backbone of a company that could not have operated for a single quarter without a licensed CPA, and I did it for free. During those same years, I got married, had my daughter B, got divorced, and became a single mother. B is 8 now. She was born into this arrangement. She spent her toddler years on a blanket in the corner of that office while I entered figures into QuickBooks and prayed she wouldn't cry during a call with a lender. I packed her lunch in the morning, dropped her at school, went to the office by 8, picked her up at 3:30, brought her back to the office, worked until 6 or 7, drove home, made dinner, put her to bed, and then opened my laptop to finish whatever I hadn't gotten to. That was my life. 5 days a week, sometimes 6. for 12 years. And during those 12 years, my younger brother Derek did nothing. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it with the precision of someone who tracked every dollar that moved through that company. Derek is 33. He has never worked at Mathis Property Group. He has never filed a document, answered a tenant call, or reconciled a bank statement. What Derek did was drive a leased BMW that was funded by company draws. What Derek did was live in an apartment whose rent was covered by a check my mother wrote from the company operating account. What Derek did was buy a condo, a 2-bedroom condo on the north side of Columbus, with a down payment that I would eventually trace back to the disbursement of one of 11 commercial loans that had my name on them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I need you to understand the texture of that office, the fluorescent light that buzzed at a frequency I can still hear when the room gets too quiet. The industrial carpet that smelled like dust no matter how often I vacuumed. My desk was in the back. My father's desk was in the front, by the window, twice the size of mine. Between us sat a Texas Instruments calculator, the large desktop model with the paper roll, the kind that prints every calculation in faded purple ink. I used that calculator every single day for 12 years. My fingers knew the keys without looking. The 7 key was slightly sticky. The plus key had a chip on the left corner. That calculator was more familiar to me than most people in my life, and it sat on a desk that was not mine, in a company that was not mine, printing numbers for a business that used my license, my labor, and my name, without giving me a single thing in return. The first time I asked about the ownership stake, I was 28. Glenn said soon. The second time, I was 30. He said the market was soft and it wasn't the right time to restructure. The third time, I was 33, and I brought a printed draft of an operating agreement amendment I'd written myself. He set it on the corner of his desk under a coffee mug and never mentioned it again. The fourth time, I was 35. I didn't ask Glenn. I asked my mother. I sat across from Patrice at her kitchen table while Bea colored in the next room, and I said, as gently as I knew how, "Mom, it's been 10 years. When are we going to formalize the ownership?" Patrice looked at me over her reading glasses and laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Worse. A dismissive one. She said, "You'd run this place into the ground without us, sweetie. Just be grateful you have job security." Job security. For an unpaid position. I drove home that night, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached for 2 days. Bea was in the back seat, singing along to the radio. She didn't know. She didn't know that her mother had just been told in the gentlest possible voice that she was furniture, useful, expected to stay, and never going to be treated as an owner of anything. But I stayed. I want you to understand why. When people hear stories like this, they say, "Why didn't you just leave?" And I need you to hear me when I tell you that just leaving is the most useless advice in the world when the person asking has never had to calculate what leaving actually costs. I had no salary, which meant I had no employment history for the past 12 years that a landlord or a bank would recognize. My resume had a 12-year gap that read, "Family business," with no W-2 to verify it. My CPA license was active, but every professional reference I had was connected to my parents' company. My health insurance was through a plan Glenn set up under the company. Bea's pediatrician, her dentist, her school enrollment, all of it listed addresses and contacts tied to the life my parents had built around me. I wasn't staying because I was weak. I was staying because every load-bearing wall of my life had been built on a foundation my parents controlled, and they knew it. That email proved they knew it. In January, during a routine bank reconciliation, I found it. I was cross-referencing loan payment schedules with the company's disbursement records. One of the commercial loans, a $120,000 line of credit through a regional bank, listed a personal guarantor. My name. My social security number, my CPA license number. The signature on the guarantee form looked like mine, the loops on the M, the way the Y trailed off. But I didn't sign it. I had never seen that document before in my life. My hands went cold the moment I saw my Social Security number on a loan I never signed. I pulled the file for the second loan. Same thing. My name, my SSN, my license. A third. Same. I stayed at that desk for 4 hours after everyone left. I pulled every commercial loan file in the office. There were 11. 11 loans over 9 years. Every single one listed Marilyn Mathis as personal guarantor. Every single one carried my CPA license number as the compliance officer of record. Every single signature was forged. The total personal liability exposure across all 11 loans was $2.1 million. I sat in that office chair, in that fluorescent light, with that calculator on the desk beside me, and I understood something that rearranged every cell in my body. My parents had not forgotten to give me ownership. They had deliberately kept me off the LLC so that I would carry the liability without the protection. My license was their shield. My credit was their collateral. And my inability to leave was their insurance policy. I was not an employee. I was not a partner. I was not even a daughter doing her duty. I was a guarantor, a signature, a Social Security number attached to a person they assumed would never look closely enough to see what they'd done. And then I found the email. On the shared office computer in the sent folder of my father's email account was a draft message to a commercial loan broker. Glenn had written, "My daughter handles all compliance. Her CPA license covers us. We don't need outside help. She's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. Not she chooses to stay. Not she's a valued partner. She's not going anywhere. Like I was a piece of equipment bolted to the floor." My mother hugged me that morning. The same morning, I found the email proving she'd planned this for years. 2 weeks after I found the loans, something happened that I never expected. My ex-husband Marcus's new wife, Joanne, called me. Joanne is a paralegal. We had been civil since the divorce, but barely. I resented her for 2 years, not because she married Marcus, because she was good with B, and I hated that someone else was good with my daughter during the weeks I didn't have her. But Joanne called me on a Tuesday evening and said something that stopped me in the middle of chopping onions for dinner. She said, "Marilyn, something is wrong with your credit. I pulled the shared custody financial disclosure for the court update, and there are liens I've never seen before. Someone is destroying your credit. I pulled the filings." She paused. Then she said very quietly, "Marilyn, this is fraud." 3 months later, I'd understand why Joanne called that Tuesday. But that week, I thought she was the last person I'd ever trust. I was wrong. Joanne had seen the irregularities from the outside, from a perspective I couldn't access because I was standing too close. She sent me the credit report. She highlighted the entries. She sat across from me at a Panera Bread on a Saturday morning while B was at a birthday party, and she walked me through every fraudulent filing, line by line, with the calm focus of someone who reads legal documents for a living. And when she was done, she looked at me and said, "You need to protect yourself now, not next month. Now." That was the moment. Not a dramatic explosion. Not a confrontation. A paralegal I had resented for 2 years setting down her coffee and showing me the shape of my own cage from the outside. I drove home from that Panera and I sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes. B wasn't home. The house was empty. I put my hands on the steering wheel, the same way I always did, and I felt something shift. Not in my mind, in my spine. A straightening, a settling. Like a foundation being poured. I was not going to confront my parents. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg for what was mine. I was going to dismantle the cage from the inside, bar by bar, in silence, and by the time anyone heard the sound of it falling, I would be gone. The first thing I did was inventory the cage. I sat at my kitchen table that night and I made a list. Not an emotional list, a logistics list. What I needed to leave, what I had to acquire. The list had 4 columns: housing, income, legal protection, evidence. Each column needed to be filled before I could move. If I left without all 4, they would pull me back. If I confronted them before all 4 were complete, they would close ranks, destroy evidence, and make me look like the unstable one. I had seen it before, in other families. The person who speaks up first without proof becomes the person the family calls crazy. I was not going to be that person. I gave myself 6 months. That might seem long. It wasn't. I was building an entire life in parallel to the one I was living, and I had to do it without anyone noticing. Every morning I drove to that office. Every day I sat at that desk. Every evening I smiled at my parents and said the right things and went home and worked on the architecture of my freedom until midnight. Housing came first. In February, I started driving through neighborhoods on the west side of Columbus during my lunch breaks. I told Glenn I was running errands. I told Patrice I was picking up supplies. I was looking at commercial office space. I found a small suite in a professional building on West Broad Street, 600 square feet, a reception area and a private office, enough for a solo CPA practice. I met the landlord on a Thursday when Glenn was at a property inspection. I signed the lease using money I had been saving in a separate account I'd opened at a credit union across town, an account my parents didn't know existed. I paid first month, last month, and security deposit in cash. I kept the lease in a locked file box in the trunk of my car. Every time I drove to that empty office to check on it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like a person with a future. The suite smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. The light came through the windows without that fluorescent buzz. There was no calculator on the desk because there was no desk yet. It was just a room. But it was my room, and no one in my family knew it existed. Income was next. I contacted 3 former clients who had used Mathis Property Group's tax preparation services and who I knew personally, carefully, quietly. I told them I was considering starting my own practice. I asked if they would be open to transitioning their accounts. All 3 said yes. One of them said, "Marilyn, I always thought you were the whole operation anyway." I had a pipeline. Not enough to live on immediately, but enough to project revenue for the first 6 months. Legal protection was the column that required Joanne. She connected me with a fraud attorney, a woman named Dana Chen, who worked out of a firm near the courthouse. Dana reviewed the loan documents, the forged signatures, the credit reports. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "This isn't a family dispute. This is identity theft and forgery. You have options." She helped me draft pre-signed withdrawal notices to every lender. She helped me file a formal CPA license disassociation with the Ohio Accountancy Board. She helped me prepare certified letters to all 11 financial institutions, informing them that the guarantor signatures were unauthorized. Every document was set to arrive or activate on the same day, a single day, a Friday. Evidence was the column that nearly got me caught. I needed copies of every forged loan document, every bank statement showing disbursements, the email from Glenn to the broker, and the company's full financial records showing that I had never been compensated. I photographed documents on the shared computer during windows when the office was empty. I made copies of physical files on Saturday mornings when I told my parents I was catching up on reconciliations, which technically I was, just not for them. I stored everything on an encrypted flash drive that I kept in my coat pocket at all times. Not at home, where Patrice occasionally visited unannounced. Not in the office, where Glenn or Derek might find it. On my body. And then Derek almost caught me. It was a Tuesday in March. I had the shared computer open with 6 loan files loaded across the screen. My phone was positioned to photograph the signatures. I had calculated that I had a 40-minute window because Glenn was at a lender meeting and Patrice was at a hair appointment. Derek was supposed to be at his condo. He was never in the office. Never. Until that Tuesday. He walked in without knocking because he never knocked, because the office was his parents' company and he treated it like his living room, and he was 3 feet from the monitor when I turned, put my phone in my pocket in one motion, and said, "Hey, do you know if Mom wants Chipotle or Panera? I'm doing a lunch run." He paused. My pulse was so loud I was certain he could hear it. He looked at the screen. The tabs were visible at the top. The loan amounts were in the headers, but Derek has never read a financial document in his life. He wouldn't know a loan guarantee from a grocery receipt. He said Chipotle, grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door, and left. I sat down. My legs were shaking so badly the chair rolled on the carpet. I saved the photographs, closed every tab, cleared the browser history, and did not go back to those files for 2 weeks. If you are listening to this and you are in the middle of your own quiet operation, if you are gathering evidence or securing a lease or opening an account that no one knows about, I want to tell you something. The fear doesn't go away. It sits in your chest like a stone every single day. You will have moments like that Tuesday where everything almost collapses and you have to smile through adrenaline so sharp it tastes like metal. You keep going anyway, because the alternative is staying in the cage, and you already know what that costs. The next 4 months were the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the CPA exam. Harder than my divorce. Harder than single parenting a toddler in the back office of a company that was exploiting me. Because for 4 months, I lived 2 complete lives simultaneously. At the office, I was Marilyn the dutiful daughter. I filed the quarterly taxes. I reconciled the accounts. I processed rent. I smiled at my father and answered my mother's calls and pretended that nothing had changed. At night, after B was asleep, I was Marilyn the architect. I set up my new office. I moved client files 1 folder at a time in my purse over the course of weeks. I furnished the space from thrift stores and online marketplace listings, paying cash for everything. A desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a printer. The cognitive load was crushing. I maintained 2 calendars in my head. The real calendar and the visible calendar. The visible calendar showed lunch errands and hair appointments and school pickups. The real calendar showed lease payments, filing deadlines, lender notification dates, and the countdown to a Friday in July that I had circled in my mind every day for months. In April, Glenn did something that almost broke me. He took me to lunch. Just the 2 of us. He chose a restaurant we used to go to when I was a teenager. He ordered the same thing he always ordered. And over pasta, he looked at me with something that resembled warmth and said, "Marilyn, I've been thinking. This Christmas, let's formalize your ownership stake. 30%, like we always talked about. It's time." I felt something crack in my chest. Not the plan cracking. Something older. The part of me that was still that 25-year-old who believed her father. The part that wanted the promise to be real this time. I drove home from that lunch and I sat in the parking lot of B's school for 20 minutes before I went in to pick her up. I asked myself if I was making a mistake. If maybe he meant it. If maybe I should give them one more chance. 2 weeks later, Glenn created a new position at the company. Director of Operations. Salary, $85,000 a year. He gave it to Derek. The same week he told me there was no budget to pay me even a modest stipend. Derek, who had never managed a property, never spoken to a tenant, never reconciled a single account, was now earning $85,000 from a company that ran on my license and my labor. The crack in my chest sealed shut. It sealed with something harder than bone. I went home that night and I moved my target date up by 3 weeks. In May, I heard the thing that became the hinge of my life. It was a Sunday. B and I had come over for brunch, which we did most Sundays because that is what dutiful daughters do. B wanted to show Patrice a drawing she'd made. I was walking down the hallway toward the kitchen, holding B's hand, when I heard my mother on the phone. She was talking to my Aunt Ruth. She was laughing. She said, "Marilyn is not the daughter you invest in. She's the daughter who pays the bills. Derek is the one with potential. She'll never leave because she has nowhere else to go." I stopped in that hallway. Bea tugged my hand. She said, "Mommy, come on." I looked down at my daughter's face and I smiled and I said, "1 second, baby." And I stood there holding an 8-year-old's hand while my mother described me as a utility. Not the daughter you invest in, the daughter who pays the bills. She'll never leave because she has nowhere else to go. Patrice was wrong about one thing. I did have somewhere to go. A 600-square-foot office on West Broad Street with my name on the lease, 3 clients in the pipeline, a fraud attorney on retainer, and a flash drive in my coat pocket containing evidence of 11 forged loan guarantees totaling $2.1 million. I had somewhere to go. I had been building it for 4 months, and in 6 weeks, Patrice would find out exactly how wrong she was. June and early July were final preparations. Dana Chen reviewed every document one last time. The certified letters to all 11 lenders were printed, signed, and sealed. Each one contained a detailed summary of the unauthorized guarantor signatures, a formal notification that Marilyn Mathis was withdrawing any implied or explicit consent, and a request for immediate review of the loan terms. The CPA license disassociation with the Ohio Accountancy Board was filed with an effective date of the 3rd Friday in July. My resignation letter was written. 1 paragraph. No emotion. Just facts. Effective immediately, Marilyn Mathis is resigning from all roles at Mathis Property Group and withdrawing her CPA license from any association with the company. I wrote one additional document. A single-page summary listing all 11 loans, the dates they were originated, the amounts, the forged signatures, and the fact that Marilyn Mathis had never authorized any of them. This page was not for a lawyer. It was for my father's desk. So he would know, the moment he read it, that I knew everything, and that it was too late. The night before, I lay in my bed in the dark. Bea was asleep in her room. The house was quiet. I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system clicking through its cycle on the other side of the wall. A car passed on the street below, its headlights drawing a slow arc across the ceiling, and then the room went dark again. I thought about what I was going to carry out of that office tomorrow and what I was going to leave. I was going to take my personal files, client contact information that belonged to me, my CPA certificate in its frame, photographs of Bea that I kept on my desk. I was going to leave the Texas Instruments calculator. That calculator had been my companion for 12 years. My fingers knew every key. The 7 was sticky. The plus had a chip. I had done 10,000 calculations on that machine, but it belonged to a desk that wasn't mine, in a company that was never going to be mine, and leaving it behind was the most honest thing I could do. I was done adding up numbers for people who only saw me as a number. I did not sleep that night. Not from fear, from precision. My mind ran the sequence over and over. Arrive at 5. The office would be empty except for Glenn, who always worked late on Fridays doing his own version of paperwork, which mostly meant reading email and eating takeout. Patrice would be at home. Derek would be wherever Derek goes. Walk in. Place the documents. Walk out. Drive west. I rehearsed each step until the sequence felt mechanical, until there was no room left in the choreography for hesitation. By 4 in the morning, the first gray light was pressing against the window blinds. I got up, showered, and dressed in the same clothes I wore to the office every Friday. Nothing different. Nothing that would register. The last thing I did before leaving the bedroom was open the nightstand drawer where I kept the flash drive at night. I held it in my palm for a moment. It weighed almost nothing. It contained everything. Friday, July 19th. I dropped Bea at her father's house for the weekend custody exchange at 4:30. Marcus said she seemed excited about something. I said she was looking forward to swimming. Bea hugged me at the door. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo we had used that morning. She said, "Bye, Mommy. See you Sunday." I said, "See you Sunday, baby." I held her 1 second longer than usual. She didn't notice. Children never notice the extra second. I walked back to my car and I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel, watching through the windshield as Marcus closed the front door. The porch light was on. The street was quiet. I could hear a lawnmower somewhere 2 or 3 blocks away. I drove to the office. I parked in the side lot where I always parked, in the space closest to the dumpster enclosure. The same space I had parked in for 12 years. The asphalt was cracked in a pattern I could have drawn from memory. I sat in my car for 60 seconds, not hesitating, breathing, counting the actions I was about to take. The stack of documents was on the passenger seat, inside a plain manila folder. I picked them up. I got out. I locked the car. The evening air was heavy. July in Columbus. Humid. The kind of heat that sits on your shoulders like a wet towel. I could hear traffic on East Main, the low drone of it, steady and indifferent. I had walked this path from the side lot to the front door roughly 3,000 times. I knew where the sidewalk was uneven, where the concrete had lifted a 1/4 inch from a tree root underneath. I stepped over it the way I always did. The office was warm. The air conditioning cycled on and off in that building and, on summer afternoons, the back half was always stuffy. The moment I opened the door, the smell hit me. That same dust smell from 12 years of walking those halls. Warm carpet and old paper and the faint chemical trace of the cleaning solution the building super used on the tile in the entryway. The fluorescent light buzzed. The one above the copy machine had been flickering for 3 weeks. No one had called maintenance. No one ever called maintenance. That had always been my job, too. Glenn was at his desk, facing his computer, a takeout container beside him. Chinese food. I could smell the soy sauce from the doorway. A white plastic fork rested across the lid. His reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead the way he wore them when he was scrolling. The desk lamp cast a warm circle across his papers, while the overhead fluorescence washed everything else in that flat, bluish light I had worked under for 4,000 days. He looked up when I walked in. He said, "Hey, Mare, thought you'd left already." I had rehearsed this silence for 6 months. I walked to his desk. My shoes were quiet on the carpet, 8 steps from the front door to the edge of his desk. I had never counted them before. I counted them now. I set the documents down in a single stack, aligned with the corner of his desk, on the clean space next to his takeout container. The resignation letter on top. The CPA license withdrawal notice beneath it. The certified letter summary beneath that. And at the bottom, the single-page document listing all 11 forged loan guarantees, the amounts, the dates, and my social security number on every one. The paper made a soft sound against the wood, like a whisper, like something finally being set down after being carried too long. I said, "These are for you." He looked at the stack. He looked at me. His reading glasses slid down from his forehead and caught on the bridge of his nose. He pushed them up, a reflex. He said, "What is this?" I said, "Read them." His hand moved toward the stack. His fingers touched the edge of the resignation letter. I watched his eyes find the first line. I watched his lips part slightly, the way they did when he was processing something unexpected. The takeout fork rolled off the container lid and fell onto the desk blotter. He didn't pick it up. He didn't look up. I could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above us and the air conditioning clicking on in the far wall unit, and the absolute silence of a man beginning to understand that the floor he was standing on had been removed. I turned around. I walked to my desk, the back of the office where I had spent 12 years. The overhead light here was slightly dimmer than the one above Glenn's desk. It had always been dimmer. I had mentioned it once, in my second year. No one changed it. I opened the bottom drawer and I took out my personal files, a thin stack of folders held together with a rubber band. I took B's photographs, 3 of them, taped to the partition wall beside my monitor. A school portrait from first grade, a snapshot from the park, a drawing she had made of the 2 of us holding hands, with the sun in the corner and our names written in her careful, oversized letters. I peeled each one off gently, leaving the tape marks on the fabric partition. I took my framed CPA certificate from the shelf above the desk. The glass was dusty. I wiped it once with my sleeve. I looked at the Texas Instruments calculator sitting on the corner of the desk. It sat in the same position it had occupied since the day I started. There was a faint rectangular clean spot on the desk surface beneath it, where the dust hadn't settled, a ghost outline of all those years. I touched it one time, the 7 key, slightly sticky under my fingertip. I pressed it gently enough that no number registered. Then I pulled my hand back. I left it there. Behind me, I heard the sound of paper turning. Glenn had reached the 2nd page. I heard him exhale. It was a short breath, not quite a gasp, more like the sound a person makes when they step into water colder than they expected. I did not turn around. I did not wait to hear what he would say. There was nothing he could say that would change what those documents contained. I had played this moment in my mind 500 times, and in every version I left before the talking started. The talking was his problem now. I walked past my father. I could see in my peripheral vision that his face had changed. The color was draining from it the way light drains from a window at dusk, slowly and then all at once. His jaw was set in a way I recognized. It was the jaw he used when a lender denied a loan extension, when a tenant threatened legal action, when the world pushed back against Glenn Mathis. But this time, the push was coming from inside the room, from the metal desk in the back, from the person he said was not going anywhere. His mouth opened. He said my name. Marilyn. Just my name. Not a question. Not a command. A reflex. The sound of someone reaching for a handle that is no longer attached to anything. I kept walking. I walked through the front door of Mathis Property Group for the last time. The brass handle was warm from the afternoon sun. I had touched that handle roughly 6,000 times in 12 years. The metal was worn smooth in the center where thousands of palms had gripped it over the decades. My palm fit the groove exactly. This was the last time. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the latch catching the strike plate the way it always had, and the sound of it was so ordinary, so unremarkable, that it seemed impossible it could mean what it meant. But that is how cages open. Not with an explosion. With a click. The evening air wrapped around me as I stepped onto the sidewalk. The sun was lower now, throwing long shadows from the buildings across the street. The lawnmower I had heard earlier was gone. In its place, the sound of children playing somewhere in the distance, their voices thin and bright and unconcerned with anything that was happening inside the building I had just walked out of. I could smell hot asphalt and cut grass and the faint sweetness of someone grilling on a patio nearby. I got in my car. I pulled out of the side lot. I turned west on East Main and I drove across Columbus. I did not look in the rearview mirror. Not once. The city moved past me in the windshield. Traffic lights, strip malls, gas stations. The Wendy's where I used to buy a Frosty on Friday evenings when I was too tired to cook. The overpass where I-70 crosses Broad Street. The neighborhoods shifting from east side to west side, from familiar to new. I drove 22 minutes to West Broad Street. I parked in front of my building. The parking lot was nearly empty. A Friday evening, everyone gone for the weekend. The building was brick, 3 stories, with green awnings over the ground floor windows. I had chosen it partly because of those awnings. They made the building look permanent, established, like a place where serious work happened. I walked up 1 flight of stairs. The stairwell smelled like lemon cleaning solution, sharp and clean. My footsteps echoed on the concrete steps. I unlocked the door to my office. The key turned smoothly. New lock, new key, new door. I stepped inside. I closed the door behind me. I turned the lock. The deadbolt slid into place with a sound that traveled through my wrist and up my arm and into the center of my chest. And then there was silence. I stood in the middle of my office. My office. 600 square feet of clean carpet and fresh paint and windows that let in the evening light without buzzing. The light was golden now, late July, angled low through the west-facing glass, casting long, warm rectangles on the carpet. No fluorescent hum, no dust smell, no sound of Glenn shuffling papers, no tension in the air that came from knowing someone might question what I was doing, or where I was going, or why I took so long at lunch. Just silence. And the silence was so complete, so absolute, so different from every room I had stood in for 12 years that my body did something my mind hadn't authorized. I started shaking. Not from cold, not from fear. From the sudden total absence of threat. My body had been running on adrenaline for so long that when the danger stopped, the machinery didn't know what to do. My hands trembled. My knees softened. I sat down on the floor, right there on the carpet, and I breathed. Really breathed. I felt my lungs expand all the way to the bottom, filling with air that had no performance in it, no strategy, no second meaning. Just air. Just breathing. Just a woman sitting on the floor of a room that belonged to her, where no one was coming to check on her, no one was monitoring her, no one was using her. The carpet was soft under my palms. I pressed my fingers into it. Clean fibers, no dust, no 12 years of other people's footsteps ground into the weave. Outside the window, I could hear a bus stop. Its air brakes exhaled, a long mechanical sigh, and then it pulled away, and the street was quiet again. If you are listening to this and you know what it feels like when the silence arrives after years of noise, when you finally close a door that no one else has a key to, and the absence of tension is so unfamiliar that it breaks you open, then you already know what I'm about to say. That silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard, and it was beautiful. The cascade started Monday morning. At 8:47 a.m., Glenn opened the office to discover that every single vendor, tenant, and lender associated with Mathis Property Group had received notification that the company's licensed CPA was no longer affiliated. The Ohio Accountancy Board had processed the disassociation. The certified letters had arrived at all 11 lender offices between Saturday and Monday morning delivery, timed so that nothing could be intercepted or recalled over the weekend. His phone started ringing before he could finish reading the summary I'd left on his desk. 14 calls came in before noon. I know because Dana Chen's office was monitoring the lender responses through formal acknowledgement receipts. 3 tenants called to say they were withholding rent pending clarification of the company's management structure. 2 of them were long-term tenants, families who had rented from Mathis Property Group for more than 5 years. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to know who was minding the books. No one could answer them. One lender, the regional bank holding the largest loan, a $340,000 commercial mortgage, demanded an immediate review of the guarantor status. The loan officer called Glenn's cell phone directly. Glenn did not pick up the first time, or the second. By the third call, 40 minutes later, he answered. I know this because the loan officer later contacted Dana Chen's office to confirm receipt of my withdrawal notice, and he mentioned, almost as an aside, that Mr. Mathis had sounded confused on the phone. Confused. Not angry. Not defensive. Confused. As if the architecture of his own company was suddenly unfamiliar to him. By Tuesday, 2 more lenders had frozen the company's credit lines pending verification. The freeze meant no draws, no disbursements, no access to the revolving funds that paid the landscapers, the plumbers, the pest control company with the handwritten invoices. Bills that were due on the 1st of the month suddenly had no mechanism to be paid. By Wednesday, the Ohio State Board had opened a formal inquiry into CPA license misuse, listing Glenn Mathis as the primary respondent. The inquiry came with a 90-day response window and a requirement to hire legal counsel, defense attorney fees that a company with frozen credit lines and departing tenants could not easily absorb. Dana estimated the legal costs for the inquiry response alone would run between $40,000 and $60,000. Derek's $85,000 salary became unfundable within 2 weeks. The operating account that had been writing his bi-weekly checks was now subject to lender review. 2 major tenants terminated their leases citing management instability, which in practical terms meant they read about the state board inquiry and decided they didn't want their housing tied to a company under investigation. The BMW lease payment was due on the 15th. The condo mortgage was due on the 1st. And the company's only licensed financial professional had walked out carrying the evidence of 11 forged signatures. Derek, the director of operations, was now directing operations for a company that could not pay its vendors, could not access its credit lines, could not file compliant tax documents, and could not explain to a state board why a CPA license had been used without authorization on 11 separate loan guarantees. I wondered if he thought about that Chipotle Tuesday, if he ever replayed it, if he ever realized what was on that screen. Glenn called me 19 times between Saturday and the following Thursday. I know because I watched the notifications appear on my phone, one by one, each vibration a small punctuation mark in the silence of my new office. The progression was exactly what I expected. The first call, Saturday morning at 9:12, had the tone of someone trying to sound casual. Maybe he thought I was emotional, that I'd come back after the weekend, the way I'd come back after every disappointment, every broken promise, every moment that should have been my last. The second and third calls Sunday were more direct. His voicemails got shorter, more clipped. By Monday afternoon, after the lender calls started, his voice changed. The messages shifted from "Call me back, Mayor," to "Marilyn, we need to discuss this," to "This is going to hurt the family," to "You're making a mistake you can't take back," to finally, on Thursday evening, a voicemail that was just breathing, and then a single sentence. "I don't understand how you could do this." I listened to that voicemail once, sitting at my desk on West Broad Street, in the chair I had bought for $60 from a secondhand office furniture store. The evening light was coming through the window. I held the phone to my ear and I heard my father's breathing and then those 8 words. "I don't understand how you could do this." As if I had done something to him. As if the 11 forged signatures in my name were not relevant context. As if 12 years of unpaid labor were not part of the equation. As if "she's not going anywhere" was not a sentence he had written with his own fingers and sent to a loan broker. I set the phone down and I didn't listen to another voicemail from him for 3 months. Patrice tried a different approach. She called my Aunt Ruth and told her that Marilyn had abandoned the family business and was being influenced by bad people. She called 2 of my cousins and said I was having some kind of breakdown. She posted on Facebook about the importance of family loyalty, a long post with a stock photo of hands clasped together and the words, "Family First" in script font across the top. She did not mention the loans. She did not mention the forged signatures. She did not mention 12 years of unpaid labor. She mentioned loyalty, duty, gratitude. The vocabulary of a woman who had always understood that the right words could make exploitation sound like love. But Aunt Ruth had already heard from me. I had called her the week before my departure and told her the truth. Not all of it. Enough. Enough so that when Patrice called with her version, Ruth said, "Patrice, I think you should talk to a lawyer before you talk to me." That was the last conversation they had for a while. Derek sent me one text. It said, "Way to blow up the family, Marilyn." 7 words. No question mark. No period. Just the accusation, hanging there on the screen like a slammed door. I read it while I was unpacking a box of office supplies in my new space, a box of pens, a stapler, a package of sticky notes. the yellow kind, the same brand I had used at the old office. I set the phone face down on the desk, peeled a sticky note from the package, and wrote the date on it. July 22nd, the first Monday of my new life. I stuck it to the edge of my monitor. Then I continued unpacking. Joanne checked in every few days during those first weeks. She would text short messages. How are you doing? Do you need anything? B had a good week. She never asked for details about the family fallout. She never made it about her. She never said I told you so or asked if the evidence had been enough or whether Dana Chen needed anything else from the credit report she'd first flagged 7 months earlier. She was just there, steady, present, without pressure. The woman I had resented for 2 years had become the sturdiest wall in my new life. And I understood finally that the people who show up for you are not always the people you expected. Sometimes they are the people you spent years refusing to see clearly. The first weeks of freedom were not what I expected. I thought I would feel victorious. I didn't. I felt disoriented. For 12 years, every day had been structured by someone else's expectations. Now I woke up, and the day was mine, and I didn't know what to do with it. I made coffee in my office kitchenette, and I stood at the window looking at the parking lot, and I realized I was waiting for someone to tell me what to do next, waiting for the phone to ring with a demand, waiting for the guilt to tell me I'd made a terrible mistake. The phone didn't ring. The guilt came, but it came in waves, not as a flood, and each wave was smaller than the last. By August, the waves came only at night, and by September they were barely ripples, and by October they were memories of waves, ghosts of a tide that had already gone out. I took on my first independent client in August, a small business owner who needed quarterly tax preparation, a woman named Sandra who ran a cleaning service out of her home. I sat across from her at my desk, in my office, and I opened my laptop, and I began the work I had been doing for 12 years. But this time, every dollar I earned was mine. Every hour I worked was compensated. Every document I signed was my choice. The first invoice I sent had my name on the header. Mathis CPA Services, LLC, my name on the operating agreement. My 30% was actually 100. Sandra paid within 5 days. I deposited the check at the credit union, and I stood at the counter and I looked at the receipt, and the number was modest. It was not life-changing, but it was clean. It was earned. It was mine. In September, I did something small that meant everything. I went to an office supply store and I bought a Texas Instruments calculator, the same model, the large desktop version with the paper roll and the purple ink. The clerk at the register asked if I needed a gift receipt. I said no. I brought it back to my office and I set it on my desk. My desk. In my office. I plugged it in and I pressed the 7 key and it wasn't sticky. The plus key didn't have a chip. It was new. It was mine. And it sat on a surface where my name was on the lease, where my labor had value, where no one was using my license as collateral for loans I never signed. I ran my first calculation on it, a simple addition for a client's quarterly estimate, the purple ink printed clean and straight. I tore off the tape and I held it and I started crying in a way I hadn't cried in years. Not grief. Release. 12 years of adding up numbers for people who subtracted me, and now I was doing math that counted. The paper tape curled in my hand, light as air, the ink still warm from the printer head. I kept that first strip of tape. I folded it once and put it in the top drawer of my desk, underneath the sticky note that read, July 22nd. Proof that the numbers had started over. 3 months after I left, on an October afternoon, I was reviewing my first independent client's tax return at my desk. The office was quiet. The light was good. Autumn in Columbus and the trees along West Broad had turned the color of copper and rust, and the late afternoon sun came through the window warm and low. B had drawn a picture of our new Saturday routine, pancakes and the park, and I taped it to the wall next to my CPA certificate. The drawing showed two stick figures at a table, one tall and one short, with a stack of pancakes between them that was taller than both of us. She had written our names above our heads in purple crayon. My phone lit up on the desk beside me. Glenn's name. I looked at the screen. I looked at it for a long time. The phone vibrated once, twice, 3 times, 4. I watched his name pulse on the glass, and then I picked up the phone, set it face down on the desk, and returned to my work. I chose for the first time not to answer a call from my father. Not out of guilt, not out of anger, not out of spite or strategy, out of peace. I simply did not want to, and I didn't have to, and that was enough. As of that October, Glenn had retained a defense attorney for the state board inquiry. The attorney's fees were coming from his personal savings because the company's operating accounts were under lender review. 2 of the 11 loans had been flagged for potential fraud investigation by the lender's compliance departments. Derek's salary had been suspended indefinitely. The BMW was returned to the leasing company. Patrice had stopped calling Aunt Ruth. And the storefront office on East Main Street, with its fluorescent lights and its dust carpet smell and the emptied desk in the back, where a 25-year-old woman once sat down believing her father's promise, was open only 3 days a week now, because the company that couldn't function without a licensed CPA was learning exactly what that meant. The evenings are different now. I pick up B from school and we go home to our apartment, a 2-bedroom near her school that I signed the lease on in my own name with income I earned myself. I make dinner. She does homework. I help with math, which makes her laugh because she says of course her mom is good at math. We read before bed. After she's asleep, I sit at the kitchen table, sometimes with work, sometimes with just tea, and I listen to the quiet, not the silence of an office I just escaped, the quiet of a home, a real one where no one is going to walk in and tell me what I owe them, one where the only numbers I add up are mine. I used to think that loyalty meant enduring, that if I worked hard enough and gave enough and stayed long enough, the people who were supposed to love me would eventually see my value. I was wrong. They saw my value from the beginning. That's exactly why they never let me own any of it. Love and exploitation can live in the same house, eat at the same table, and call each other family. The difference is that love wants you to grow. Exploitation wants you to stay exactly where you are, doing exactly what you're doing, forever. And if someone in your family has ever called your sacrifice duty while calling someone else's comfort potential, you already know what that silence costs. You know the shape of it, the weight of it, the years it takes from you while you wait for a promise that was never going to be kept. Tell me in the comments what you stopped giving and when you finally walked away. This story has been told. One Texas Instruments calculator left on a desk that was never hers. One flash drive carried in a coat pocket through 6 months of fear. And one locked door on West Broad Street, where the silence finally became peace. If you've ever stayed too long at a table where your labor was the meal, I want to hear when you stood up. Drop it in the comments. Subscribe if these stories find you at the right